Hey guys, it is Friday and it is actually officially 4th of July, I guess, right? It's our 4th of July weekend, so you get a holiday today. But I'm not taking it off because I've got a guest today who we had come on about 2 weeks ago and we had some technical difficulties and I had to have him back because he's got some interesting things to talk about. So I wanted to make sure he was here. This is ASMM Digital Small Business Connections. This is where entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs learn through their own mistakes, through their own lessons, through what they have gone through so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. You don't have to do the same things. You can learn from them and get better each time. So we're on episode 53, very exciting. And we are live again on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. There's a bird right behind me. You guys see that? Let me see. There you go. You see the bird? If you're listening, you don't see the bird, but he's flying around back there and he's a beautiful cardinal. So that's really nice. Also, we have ASMM Digital Campus. So asmmcampus.com. You can go there and learn how to do social media. You don't have to hire an agency. I would love for you to hire an agency, but if you're not ready yet, go there and learn. And sometimes go there and learn whether it's time for you to have an agency. That may be something that you find out. But the truth is, we're putting information there so you can learn what we do, how we do it, and how you can implement the same things in your business. And there's a free subscription. There's also a paid subscription. Go over and see where you need to be. I also want to remind you, because this is live, unless you're while listening to it on the podcast, because this is live, you can ask us questions. Leave a comment below and we will answer. So whether you're on Twitter or you're on YouTube or you're on Facebook, they all feed into this system that I'm using, which is StreamYard. So you can use StreamYard as well. I'm not an affiliate there. I'm not getting any money for it. I just think it's a really cool system. So if you want to do this, you can do that. But leave us a comment. We want to answer them. We've got answers and we want to give them to you. So let me introduce you to John Stoj of Verbatim Financial today. Hi, John. How are you?
Hey, Ann. Great to be here. I'm doing well this morning.
Awesome. So people who are listening to this on a podcast are not seeing in the background that you have a guitar. And so we've already had this discussion about guitar. So we already like you because we have guitar players in our home.
So, I'll take any connection I can get.
There you go. So John, you have an interesting story because you went from being a financial planner or a money manager to owning a sushi restaurant. And I wanted you to tell us a little bit about how you did that, why you did it, and what you've kind of learned through the process. And then we're going to move on to some other things. But you've got a great story. I want you to tell it.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I got to say, I'm not sure it felt like such a great story. Like a lot of stories that have long and winding roads. When you're in the middle of it, it might not be the greatest story. But when I look back, I do think it was kind of cool. I did a career 360 really, comprising two 180s. My first half to 2/3 of my career was in finance, and it was a pretty much a by the book effort, starting Wall Street, going to business school, back to Wall Street, and then progressing sort of up the line to the point where I was managing institutional money between $3 and $4 billion, depending upon the particular assignment at the highest, and it was fantastic. I mean, and I felt important, and I thought it was a rewarding job, not just financially, but I thought I was doing something good in terms of providing. We managed money for retirement funds for people. So again, even though it was on the institutional side, we were doing that for folks. I thought it was great. And here's, I think, where people who maybe are familiar with the financial crisis of a decade ago might their ears might perk up. So I managed portfolios of fixed income investments, so bonds, and the bonds that I managed were, for the most part, subprime home equity bonds, so subprime mortgage bonds, and CDOs, or collateralized debt obligations. I won't go into any of that detail, no reason to, but suffice it to say, if you don't recall, those were the products that helped crash the economy a decade ago. And so I lost a job because of that. I started a company with a partner that we were going to invest in those directly after the crisis, and we were going along pretty successfully, creating a hedge fund, really, and we had the potential to have a massive payday. Maybe not like the guys that you've seen in the movie or read in the book, The Big Short, but it would have been a pretty special for us. And then we got put out of business by the government, basically because the government bailed the banks out umpteen times. The last time they did it, finally the banks called us up and said, "We don't need your money. We'll just take the taxpayers' money." And so I went home after, again, losing a couple businesses to this type of thing, and I was frustrated. And I said, "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just not doing it. I'm done." I was tired of someone else affecting my business more than I was affecting my own business.
Right.
So I started to study what would I like to do, and it was going to be as far away from finance as I could get. And I also was thinking about, what do people always need? And people always need food, and people always like to go out to restaurants. And of course, it seems funny for me to say this now. We're doing this during COVID, where people cannot go to restaurants often, and so it seems like my whole idea of risk-free in that respect business is kind of out the window. But at the time, the thought process was, okay, everybody likes food, they need food, they go there for comfort. What could I do in the food business? But I didn't want to run a restaurant, and I didn't know anything about cooking. And so it had to be a process-driven business, and that's what led me to sushi. Because I'm an analytical guy. Shocker, I'm in finance. I was a computer programmer before that. That's what led me to the jobs that I had in finance. So it had to be process-driven. It had to be something that I could get my analytical mind around more so than a creative chefy mind. That's not me.
Right.
And the thing about sushi is that it's really an assembly process more than anything else. If you buy the right ingredients, quality fish, quality vegetables, the only thing you cook is the rice. And if you cook the rice correctly, you can get folks, guys and gals with good knife skills, and they can put the sushi together. And so that's what I ended up doing was creating a business like that.
I have a question about that. So how long did it take you from, okay, so this business isn't going to work, and I've got to make a decision about what to do, and I'm going to open a restaurant? How long was that process?
It probably took me about 1.5 years to go through the whole process. I mean, first it was a process of, again, the exploration. And then the second half of the process was figuring out, if I started a business, and we'll talk about this, I think, in a little bit, but if I started a business, could I get out of the business? Because of I didn't have a dream of running a sushi restaurant or a sushi production company, which was really what we were classified as, for the rest of my life. I thought it would be fun. I thought it was something I could do until the financial markets changed, and maybe I felt differently about the markets.
Right.
So I was looking for something that I thought I could sell after some period of time. So I knew I needed to build it, grow it, and get it to a point where someone else could see the value in it.
Right. Well, and this is the difference between somebody who has that experience that you had with money and somebody like me who went into it thinking, I'm going to get a couple of clients until I can finally put a resume together and find a real job. And then my business just took off. So there's actually a couple of differences when you think about the two of us. So that's one of them. The other is how long you planned, and I just kind of jumped in. And part of that was not having that knowledge of, oh my gosh, things could fail, right? I was like, wow, what do I have to lose? Right. So there's a difference there, but it is interesting to watch the two of us and how we've made decisions on things. So yeah. So then you started the business. So tell us a little bit about how you did that.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a relatively complicated process, frankly, because it wasn't a restaurant, because it turned out that what I wanted to do was make fresh sushi and deliver it to corporate clients, because I thought if I could develop an account book of corporate clients, then that's worth something. If I can show a cash flow to a potential buyer at some point in the future, no idea when, then that would be worth something. Because I was, again, as a fixed income guy, a bonds guy, everything in my career was about cash flows, discounting them, figuring out what they were going to be worth sometime in the future. And so I wanted to have that, to be able to show it to somebody to sell the company in the future. So that was quite a process.
That is just, my mind has just been blown thinking about it, because it never even occurred to me to think about it that way. And the idea that you didn't think, I'm going to open a restaurant, which too many people think. I'm like, oh my gosh, what that involves is, and actually you just said risk-free. The truth is, you could even do that, what you just did. You could have done that in this. You could have switched over. You could have pivoted, right? Because people have gone home, but they don't. My husband is a good example of this. My husband is a little spoiled. He works for a major organization, and we joke because I'm getting ready to go to work and I'm putting my little lunch together, and he's not. And the reason is that he's at a, excuse the language, his family, or the rest of the family says, Dad, you work at a bougie ass place, because they have a chef that comes every day to cook for him. So, but he's a little spoiled. So when he's home, he's like, well, what am I going to do for lunch? So you could have offered the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, well, so what we did was we made fresh sushi every night. So we did night production in order to have it fresh for delivery for basically lunch, grab and go lunches at corporate cafeterias and schools. And by the time by the time I sold the company, we were delivering to just about every university in the Atlanta area: University of Georgia, Georgia State, Georgia Tech, Emory. We delivered to almost every hospital in the Metro Atlanta area. And so that was the idea, is that I was looking for captive audiences, people who were going to buy the stuff, and companies that we could depend on for orders every month. Instead of the whole restaurant business, and a lot of businesses, right? You turn on your sign and you hope somebody walks in the door. Maybe you try to do some advertising, but
right.
To me, that was, again, going way back to what took me out of finance in the first place. I didn't want somebody else somehow determining whether I was going to succeed. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own 2 feet. Right. I would drive around, and I would go and I would see big buildings, and I would just go in there and knock on the door. Say, do you have a cafeteria? If they had one, I would go around back and try to find the chef. And
right.
And that was how I built a lot of the business.
That is really great. All right, so let's go into, you say if you're going to start a business, start with an exit plan. So how do we do that? Because I didn't. So how do we do it?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to think about yourself initially. Think about what you want to do. How long do you want to do it? And then based upon that, what's going to happen to the business when you don't want to do it anymore, right? I think you were talking offline. We were talking about a previous guest who had said that people will start businesses and be completely content to run them until they retire, and then just shut it down, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I was not. I knew I was going to have some limited period of time. I didn't know what that period of time was. In my case, that time was determined by the birth of our son. And I could not do overnight shifts anymore, which is what we were doing. But it could be determined by anything. Maybe you just get tired of it. Maybe there's a change in life, just like what happened to me. And so what happens when you want to pull the ripcord, and you want to pull a ripcord, you want a parachute taking you down, right? You don't want to just jump out the window, which is what a lot of the fear in entrepreneurial adventures comes from what happens when it ends. I don't want to get stuck with a lease that I've signed on to, and my business isn't there, and I'm paying for office space or whatever that isn't generating an income for me. Things like that. If you've got that exit plan, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be a smooth exit, but it gives you a much better sense. So I did research in
Right.
what do small business purchasers look for? What do larger businesses owners purchasers look for? And so I had different targets in mind. I said I knew I had to get, if I wanted somebody to really buy me out, like a private equity investor or something like that, I needed revenues in the double-digit millions. That probably wasn't going to happen for me with the size of the business and the way it was going, and that's fine. So I needed to go down another rung on the ladder and look at regular small business purchasers. And those are usually mom and pop folks who are looking to go out on a business adventure of their own, but don't want to build it from scratch.
Right.
And so they're looking for the same thing we all look for, basically, from any job, which is cash flow. You want to know that you can get paid every 2 weeks or every month, and then in turn pay your bills at home. So I needed to create a situation where I could prove to folks some point in the future that there would be a steady stream of cash flow, even if I walked out the door. So the business was not based upon John Stoj. It was based upon the structure that I set up.
John, it's really interesting, and it's funny because as we talked, I was like, I don't think I know anybody who has ever gone into their business with this idea. But then it occurs to me, I work with, there's a networking friend I have, and his name is Bruce Spencer. He owns Walt Eager's service center over in somewhere, Odenton, Maryland, I think. But he came from Honeywell. He was a big executive with Honeywell, and he has 3 boys, and they were all in high school, and he knew one of them would go on to one of them will be going on to play pro ball. And the other 2, there's a good chance maybe. So he wanted to spend time with them, and he made that same decision. He was going to buy a business though, and he bought a business he knows nothing about, but he's like, but I know how to run a business. Mm-hmm. And then his idea is he'll run it and then he'll be able to sell it, because what he bought was a service center for cars. He knows nothing. He's not a mechanic. He says, so he drives now to learn more about his business. He drives the shuttle, which is just an amazing thing. He drives the shuttle. He runs the business, but he also drives the shuttle so he can talk to his customers. So I love this idea of going into it, knowing that you don't know. You weren't a sushi chef. You weren't a food aficionado. This was not something that you loved. You weren't the technician, right? We talked about that in the E-Myth. So it's a really interesting idea. So do you think there's that when you're doing this, I mean, this coming from somebody who flies by the seat of their pants, this is a big question. Do you think when you're buying a business, that's a good time to start working with a coach or a financial planner who can help you with that exit plan?
Yes. I mean, in a way, depending upon the type of person that you are, right? I think if you recognize that you're a seat of the pants person, then to me, as a non-seat of the pants person, that seems to be a hole in your skill set that you want to fill somehow with a trusted advisor. That could be hiring a financial advisor. And that would be more of a comprehensive financial advisor like I am now versus, say, an investment advisor. They're not going to help you with that kind of thing. Or it could just be a family member or a friend's. Here's another important thing that I always like to tell people. Small businesses need boards as well. And it doesn't have to be an official board of directors. Like it could be one day, but it doesn't have to be like a board of directors of Exxon or something like that. But you need some people that know enough about your business that you can talk to them about it, but are independent enough from the business to give you honest advice on it. Because otherwise, once you are the owner and you're chief cook and bottle washer, you're not gonna get perfect advice from your employees because they have their motivations to keep their jobs and whatnot. And you're not going to be able to give yourself perfect advice either. And that certainly
Right.
happened to me. You know, it sounds like I was this semi-prescient, brilliant guy who came up with this great idea. But listen, 2.5 years into it, when I couldn't figure out, you know, why I was losing clients, or how I was going to replace the revenue that I thought was happening over the summer and didn't happen, things like that. You know, I didn't have those. It wasn't in my own head that I could find the answer. I had to talk to other people for sure.
Well, and that's a scary thing to do, because sometimes you're like, I know I should, but I just don't want to hear that answer. I
Yeah,
don't want to hear what they've got to tell me.
yeah. And
So yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you. I apologize, but you know, that's exactly right. When you say you're not going to want to necessarily hear the answer that they're going to give you. And frankly, one of the reasons why I also, in addition to my son being born, why I did sell the business was because of I got those answers and they weren't the answers I wanted to hear. The way that I
Right.
could grow the business, and the business did grow after I sold it, but the way that I could grow it significantly was going to put a pressure on my family life that I was unwilling to give.
Right, exactly. So I do have a question. Can everybody do this? Can everybody grow a business that's worth selling? Or do you think that this is something, you know, we just talked about it. You can either be, you can own a business that is a lifestyle business. That's what Patrick Lee said. You can own a business that's a lifestyle business, or you can own a business that's a growth business. But do you think it's possible for everybody to be able to grow their business that way?
Two-part answer to the question, right? No,
Yeah.
everybody's different. So some people aren't, I mean, you have to have, there's an element of sales to all this.
Right.
And some people aren't programmed that way. I think anybody can sell a good product, a product they believe in, even if it's just themselves. You can sell yourself, but they don't necessarily want to go out and sell enough to grow the business. They could develop a business amongst people that already trust them for one reason or another, and that business can provide for them and their family, but it might not necessarily be a growth business. And
Right.
not every business is a growth business. I mean, the business that I started earlier this year, the Verbatim Financial, it's not going to be a growth business. This is, I hesitate to use the term but it is a lifestyle business in that I do this one. I plan on doing until I stop working at some point, you know, quite a while in the future. And I don't intend to sell it. It's not really it's not a business that you would necessarily sell. Things could happen, but
That's
that's
a
not.
that's a really good answer. I mean, it really is. It depends on what you're doing, doesn't it? It depends on what you're trying to sell. And I cannot, for the life of me, remember who said this to me recently, but they're a lot like you. They do a similar business to you, but more on a coaching end. And what they do, they're like, I I don't. What they said was, I don't want to be Tony Robbins,
Mhm.
because if I'm Tony Robbins, what happens when I'm done? It doesn't keep going,
Right.
right? Tony Robbins, once he's done, yes, maybe he's brought some guru up behind him, but that guy's still not Tony Robbins, you know, and it's still not going to follow through. So I think it's a really good way to look at it. Is, you know, where can it go, and can you grow it that way? You know, I
Mhm.
started this business and social media and marketing. Well, what happens when and goes away, right?
Mhm.
Which is
Mhm.
how we ended up being ASMM Digital, because it changes it a little bit.
Yeah, that
But
makes perfect
yeah,
sense.
yeah. So people who, if you're listening to this, and I will tell you, I had listened to hundreds of podcasts before I came into this, and I never knew how people get guests. I didn't understand it. And I didn't understand what a speaker one sheet was. I didn't understand any of that, actually, because this wasn't supposed to be a podcast. That's kind of my life, as I do things. And I'm like, it wasn't supposed to be a big fundraiser. And now we've got a nonprofit. It wasn't supposed to be this. And now I have a big business. But this wasn't supposed to be a podcast. So I didn't understand how it worked. And what happens is, you have somebody who sends me a one sheet about you, and it has some questions and it has some interesting things. And the thing that, yes, the sushi business kind of interested me, because I'm like, how do you go from one to the other? But the other thing was, why in the world would you miss your human resources department? That was a question that was on there. And I'm like, why in the world would you miss the human resources department? Everybody hates those guys.
Well, the best way to put it is that you may not think anything about it depending on the size of your business, but I needed for my sushi business, I needed to hire cooks, cleaners, all sorts of different food related jobs, and I also needed to hire delivery drivers because we delivered the sushi. And so I used to think of it, we were half logistics company, half food production company, and at some point I think we topped out at maybe 20, 24, 26 employees. So most of them, the vast majority of them, part-time. But hiring that many people in a high turnover business was difficult. I hired people. I'm gonna sound I don't know, hoity-toity, but I hired plenty of people in the past in my finance jobs. But I hired people out of Princeton, those types of schools, and I knew they were motivated. I knew they were going to work. It was just all I had to do is see, do I think they have the skill set that I need, and can I make some sort of determination whether their personality would be a fit? I didn't have to try to figure out whether they would show up every day, whether they would be the kind of person that would try to take the longest cigarette break in the middle of the production. That is super hard. I never had to deal with disgruntled employees. Those are all things that it happens in all big businesses. But you know who handles those things? The human resource department.
Exactly.
So when I started getting these calls from potential employees, from former employees, my general manager who would have issues with people, I honestly had no idea what to do, and it was super frustrating. And I had to dig into the Google box and try to find out what I could, and call folks that I knew. I knew some people from business school who were in human resources professionally, and so I did get some answers, but none of it came easy to me. And I know that, like, now I feel like it's a world different in 2020 versus 2010 when I started the business. I feel like there's a lot of third-party outsourcers that are available now that were not available even just a decade ago. So I would, as a small business owner, I would definitely look into that. If you get to the point where you're seeing that kind of issue, don't wait until it becomes a huge problem. Start looking for where you can get help early on.
Well, and unfortunately, so many of us go into it as we're technicians. We know what we're doing. We know what the product is. We know how to do that. But suddenly I was just talking to somebody about it this morning. Michael Hyatt, I think, wrote something this morning about decision fatigue, right? The manager, the owner has to make 1,000 decisions a day, and it becomes exhausting. And it's even worse when you have put yourself in a position. There's only 5 of us within, like, that actual employees in my office. And we have a lot of contractors, but the people who are in my office, I've had to train them that I'm in this number 1 position. My number 2 person, she's going to answer the questions. Please don't come and ask me every single question, because the very first person we hired, so not the very first, so it was me and it was Anastasia. We hired another person. That person could not make herself answer to Anastasia, just could not do it, which meant every single little thing she needed, she came to me. And that was the most impossible position to be in, because by 3 o'clock, I was like, oh my God, I'm done. I'm done. And it's decision fatigue, right? So if you don't have a human resources department to say, this is your chain of command, this is how this works, then it's very difficult. So I love the question. I think it was a great question. All right. So small businesses go into this, and honestly, I did. I went into this, and about probably 3 months in, I went, oh, I guess I should have a business savings account. And then it was all a year later that I had a client who I became really good friends with, and he said, you should also have a line of credit. And I said, well, I don't need any money. I'm good. I'm not borrowing anything. He says, but you should. And so I got a line of credit, even though I've never used it. I've got it. And this year, actually, he told me the same thing. He's like, so you have to have a line of credit. You're going to get it. It'll be small when you start. Every year, call them and ask them to up it. So every year since, I've called them and asked them, can you increase my line of credit? And we didn't need it this year, but we could have, right? Mm-hmm. We could have it during this virus. We could have needed it, and I had it. So it was this nice, okay, we're okay. Right? So what are the things like that we need to know? How do we protect ourselves as business owners? How do we pay attention to what we need?
So it's funny that you mentioned what you did in terms of that line of credit and savings account, because that is my number one go-to thing. And it's where I tell people that the financial world, the business world, and your personal financial world, they don't always overlap. Just like government finances don't overlap with your household finances. That just, you can't usually think of it the same way. They're different entities, so they need to be approached in a different fashion. But, and here's the big but, that on the personal finance side, you'll hear people talk about having an emergency fund. Well, the business needs that same emergency fund, and you use the term business savings account, and then also line of credit. Those are invaluable because I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I believe that there's statistical to tell you that most businesses that fail don't necessarily fail because of a bad idea. They fail because of lack of capital at the right or wrong time.
Absolutely.
So that's without a doubt number one in my mind, and it's a tough thing to do as a small business owner, because you're paying yourself last, and right. Maybe the business is maybe it had some lean months, and finally there's some profit at the end of the month, and you're saying to yourself, well, gee, I didn't pay myself, or I took very little from the business for the last little bit. I'm going to give myself, a treat instead of putting it into the savings account. And so that's kind of a huge thing to get over mentally. And it's the same thing. Again, that's one of the few same things that'll happen in your personal financial life, to put off gratification. That's tough, but important.
Right. So anybody who's been watching this or listening to this for the past few weeks is probably going to be sick of me mentioning Walt Disney. But that book is the longest book I think I've ever listened to. It's about 40 hours of listening, and I'm listening to his biography. But I was interested as I started this book. I was like, oh my gosh, he was building the Disney studios during basically right before the Depression. So I was interested in seeing what happened, because I've never heard about Disney and the Depression. And the reason is because the Depression didn't affect him at all. Actually, the only thing it did do is it gave him animators, because people were out of work. So they were willing to take jobs at less money and become animators. So that it actually helped him. But the reason was he had only invested back in his own business over and over and over again. And as I'm, this as a business owner, you spend a lot of time going, okay, so what am I getting right and what am I getting wrong? So the past few days I've been patting myself really well, really hard on the back, because I'm like, well, at least I'm doing that, right? So invest in yourself.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. Do you have any other things that we need to think about as far as business owners, or how you would suggest really getting started at paying attention to the financial part of your business?
Pay really close attention to the difference between fixed and variable costs, because one of them is the fixed cost, is what you have to pay every month, and I think what people get in trouble is when they start thinking of variable costs as fixed costs. and it's hard because labor is a variable cost, but you get to know your employees and you feel responsible for them when you're running the business and paying them. But you
I love kids. It's good.
but you can but basically people are finding out, I think, in this period of COVID, when they're having to maybe ratchet down their business, that maybe a lot of expenses they thought were fixed really are variable, because of being in times of extreme stress will cause you to cut to the bone. And obviously the goal not to cut through the bone, but it's important to know those things so you can make the decisions swiftly in a timely manner, as opposed to putting things off, maybe like it is changing your labor side of the equation, because of letting emotions get into business decisions. It can really put your whole business at risk, and then no one's in a positive situation.
Right. That's a really good point. And actually, we just had a little bit of that this month, in that you said it before we started the show. This podcast became something that kind of grew its own life, right? So we had, when we started the quarantine, we had 4 employees, and now we have an extra. And we had to do it, honestly, because of the podcast. We had to bring somebody in who could help us run the podcast and do some other things. But suddenly I paid my payroll, and I went, oh. Even though I'm getting a lot out of it, it does make you go, oh, whoa, that's not the same as it's been for, a year and a half now, right? So you've got to get used to it. So, yeah. All right. So let's move on to, because business owners, we do a lot of reading. We do a lot of reading or a lot of listening. So I do both. I actually read a lot, and I'm always listening to a book. So tell me what your favorite business books are.
So my favorite business books are, and this won't come as a shock, are both investing related. So one is on, they're both lean towards personal finance. One is especially that they're and the other is not as much. So the first one that I recommend everybody read. You don't even have to know, be a financial person to read it, because it'll open your eyes to that business, and it affects you whether you like it or not. Is the Little Book of Common Sense Investing, it's called, and it's by John Bogle. And so Bogle was the founder and head of Vanguard funds, and he introduced the world to the first index fund and low costs in investing. And what he does is explain in this book how, as you add complexity to investments and layers of services and this, that, and the other thing, all it does is reduce your long-term return. And so, I started this business to keep it simple for clients. And so, some people will say to me, why do you recommend that book? That tells people they don't need financial advisors. I say, no. That tells people how to save money when they invest and they hire financial advisors. Those are very different things. And the other book is called The Simple Path to Wealth. And it was written by a gentleman named J.L. Collins, and he is a sort of an early member of what they call the financial independence community. And you may have heard of this. They've been popular over the last few years, or gaining popularity. It's called the FIRE movement, Financial Independence, Retire Early. And there's tons of FIRE podcasts, and it's a great group of folks in general. I participate in that group. And again, it's another situation, but this guy wrote this book. Collins wrote this book, started out as a series of letters to his daughter, so that she would be able to manage her financial life. And obviously it grew into a book, and it takes you down, again, that whole path, keeping it simple, such that at some point in the future, you don't have to depend on somebody else for money. And that's the goal.
Well, and I think a lot of it when you start talking about money, actually everything we do, and I almost could call this whole podcast series self-awareness for business owners, right? You've got to be aware of everything. You can't just think about what's happening with my business right here, that what's in front of me, because it's just narrow thinking. You've got to be aware of how you are mentally, physically, how you personally are. You have to be aware of your leadership. You have to be aware of your finances. And some of that starts with reading, which is why we ask this question. When you start reading, I just said it I'm reading the Walt Disney book, and I'm like, so what are the things that he did right that I'm doing right? What are the things that he's doing that I'm not doing? And how can I change these things? So that self-awareness runs through all that we do. I'm totally going to change the name of the podcast now because it has been, every single person I've talked to on here has been very self-aware, and they've used books and knowledge to get them there, right? So even if they didn't know it, they've used these things outside, boards. You talked about boards. They've used all of those things to get there. So, well, all right, let's talk about how people can find you. You started verbatimfinancial.com.
Yep. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is to simply go to verbatimfinancial.com. You can read a little bit about the business, and there's a reach out button there. I'm happy to talk about how I can help people through Verbatim, but I also don't ever mind sharing knowledge with folks, because a lot of times, people don't need a financial advisor. They need a question answered, and I'm very happy to do that as well. So people can go right to verbatimfinancial.com. Again, read a little bit. It'll link to my blog and all that fun stuff too.
That's great. And I'm going to suggest to you, John, that you were talking about doing a podcast. Before you even do that, do on LinkedIn, do a Q&A session.
Oh, all right.
And you can do a live one. Actually, you can't do it on LinkedIn yet, but you can do a live one on Facebook, where you tell people for a couple of weeks, on this day, I'm going to have a Q&A session. If you have questions, this is a great time to come and ask them. So that would be a good way for you to get started.
Super.
Actually, that's a good way for anybody to get started. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about what's coming up on Monday. We have Crista Grasso. She's going to talk about the lean out method, and it's not what you think. She's going to talk about how to change your business from carrying so much debt, so much of, having so many financial woes, to leaning your business out in a way that you can grow through it. So I'm interested to hear what she's got to say. I want to again remind you, if you're listening to this as a podcast, please subscribe. That helps us a lot. If you are watching this or listening to it, I don't care. If you just like us even a little bit, please take a minute to go over to YouTube, youtube.com/Brennan Annie. I'm going to put it across the screen here. If you do that, you can help us so much, because we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers over there. We'd really appreciate that. So go over there. And again, if you have a business and you are so tired of the social media yourself, but you've got to do it, we can help you with that. It's what we do. So make sure you go over to asmmdigital.com and ask us. We've gotten some really nice clients lately who they're just tired of it. They hate social media themselves, and they just are like, here, hand it to me. So we do not only their business social media, but we've actually taken over their personal pages as well. So that's something we can do for you. If you're like, I know I need to be there, I'm tired of people talking about masks. I'm tired of people talking about all the bad things that are happening in the world. We can go on there for you and be you on social media. So let us know. All right, John, this has been really, really great. I'm so glad you came on. I really appreciate it. And I got your name wrong in the beginning. It is John Stoj.
Oh yeah, no,
right?
It's okay. I trust me, I've heard it all. But yeah, the J is simply pronounced like a Y. So it's Stoj. I think I'm going to put that in my signature, my email signature from now on.
I think that would be good to have them put it at the top of your speaker sheet.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good place for it. And if it's up there, I'm going to be embarrassed that I didn't see it. So thank you so much for coming on. And guys, we will see you Monday. Oops, say hi to your kid. What's his name?
Oh, Jack.
Hey, hi, buddy. Jack. All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Have a